If you're still using null, you're missing out on one of the simplest, most effective upgrades in C++, null pointer. Here is why it matters and how to use it right. Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, we are diving into one of those subtle yet important topics in C++. Null pointer versus the macro null. This isn't just about syntax. This affects correctness, clarity, and safety in your code. So let's talk about what they are, how they differ, and why should you care. Let's start at the beginning. In C and early C++, we've used null to represent a null pointer. That is, a pointer that doesn't point to anything valid, like this. Here, pointer is not pointing to any valid memory, it's null. That was the convention. But here is the catch. What is null? In most implementations, null is just a macro for the integer 0. It's not a pointer. It's defined like this. So when you write int pointer equals null, it's actually doing int pointer equals 0. Now this seems harmless, but this is C++. And in C++, 0 isn't just a null pointer, it's also an int. And this introduces ambiguity. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine this overloaded function. Now call foo with 0. Which version gets called? Well, since 0 is an int, it calls the version with an int parameter. That's what you would expect. But now try this. You might think it would call the char version, since null should mean null pointer. But remember, null is just 0, which is an int, so it still calls the integer version. That's confusing, right? This is exactly the kind of ambiguity that leads to subtle bugs, especially when working with overloaded functions or templates. Now let's talk about null pointer, which was introduced in C++ 11 to solve this problem. Null pointer is a keyword. It represents a null pointer value. But unlike null, the macro, it has its own type, stud null pointer t. So when you write this, you are assigning a null pointer, not an integer, and this removes the ambiguity. Let's go back to our overloaded example. Now let's try this with a null pointer. Guess what? This time the compiler will choose the char version because null pointer can convert to any pointer type, but not to an int. That's a massive improvement. You get clarity, type safety, and fewer surprises. So what is stud null pointer t exactly? It's the type of null pointer. You don't usually need to use it directly, but it's good to know it exists. You can even check it like this. This helps in generic programming or writing traits. Another interesting point, null pointer is not just safer with functions, it also works seamlessly with templates. Here is a common scenario in template code. Now try calling it like this. You might expect t to be a pointer, but since null, the macro, is 0, the compiler deduces t as an int. That's probably not what you wanted. Now let's use null pointer. This time t is deduced as stud null pointer t. That gives you a proper null pointer type and lets you write logic that handles it correctly. You might be wondering, is null pointer convertible to bool? Yes. And like any null pointer, it evaluates to false. This makes null pointer behave intuitively in conditionals just like you'd expect from a null pointer. Let's take a moment to contrast behavior in legacy code versus modern code. In older C++, you'd see this. This works, sure, but now consider this, and call it like that. Which one does it call? Since null is 0, you end up calling the integer version. Maybe you meant to call the pointer version, but too bad. That ambiguity bites again. Now let's change it. Null pointer removes the guesswork. It makes your code communicate exactly what you intend. You might ask, can we overload on null pointer t? Yes, it's perfectly valid. That opens up powerful and expressive APIs where null pointer semantics are explicit, not inferred from a magic number. Let's pause for a second and talk about best practices. If you're writing modern C++, you should use null pointer, always. There is no good reason to use the null macro in modern code. It's just a legacy artifact. Some codebases go as far as defining null as null pointer, just to stay consistent. Let's talk cross-language compatibility. What if you're writing a C++ interface that interoperates with C? In C, the null macro is still used, and it's usually just 0. So when you are calling C functions, null might still appear. But in your C++ side, you can still use null pointer when passing null pointers. It will convert correctly, so you don't need to mix both. Use null pointer in C++ and let the compiler handle conversions when calling C functions. Another minor thing. How does null pointer compare in size? Well, null pointer is just a keyword representing the null value. It's of type std_null_t, and that typically has no actual data. It's just a singleton type. It's not a pointer itself, but it implicitly converts to any pointer type. That's why it's so useful. Let's revisit some questions developers often ask. If you have a condition where is null pointer equal to null in terms of value, kind of. The condition will return true, but in terms of type they are different, and in overload resolution that difference matters. Can I pass null pointer to void pointer parameters? Absolutely, without issue. Null pointer converts to void pointer just fine. What about member functions? Can null pointer help with function pointers? Yes, suppose you have a function that takes a pointer to member function or function pointer. Null pointer clarifies intent better than 0 or null. This reads better than, and again no ambiguity. Let's wrap this up with a key takeaway. C++ evolves to help you write clearer, safer and more robust code. Null pointer is one of those small but powerful additions that really improves code quality. It's not just about avoiding bugs, it's about making your intent crystal clear, both to the compiler and to other humans reading your code. So if you are still using null in C++ today, it's time to let it go. Switch to null pointer, your code will thank you. And I am thanking you for watching. If this helped clarify things for you, give the video a like, subscribe and check out the playlist on the screen. See you in the next one.